It started like any other late-night rerun discovery, the kind you stumble upon when nostalgia pulls you back into a world that never really played by the rules. For years, fans of Married with Children had heard whispers about an episode that didn't quite fit, one that aired briefly, stirred unease, and then quietly vanished from rotation. No official announcements, no dramatic band splashed across headlines, just silence. The kind of silence that makes people lean in closer and ask why. The show itself was never subtle. It thrived on discomfort, on pushing ordinary frustrations into exaggerated, biting humor. Al Bundy wasn't a hero, he was exhausted. Peg wasn't the ideal housewife. She was unapologetically indifferent to expectations. Their home wasn't warm or inspiring. It was chaotic, loud, and painfully honest. That honesty was a hook. It didn't ask audiences to aspire. It invited them to laugh at the mess. But even a show built on irreverence has boundaries, whether spoken or not. There's always a line, thin, shifting, and sometimes invisible, between edgy and unsettling. Most of the time, the writers dance right along that edge, teasing it, mocking it, but never fully stepping over. Until one episode did. The story seemed harmless at first, almost predictable by the show's standards. Al and Peg, stuck in their usual routine of mutual annoyance and reluctant coexistence, decide to break out of their monotony, not for romance, not even for fun, but simply because staying home felt worse. They choose a cheap motel, the kind that practically advertises its own shoddiness. It's the perfect setting for a Bundy misadventure. Low expectations, questionable hygiene, and just enough absurdity to fuel a few jokes. At the beginning, everything follows a familiar rhythm. The bickering, the sarcasm, the awkward attempts at rekindling something that might never have been there to begin with. The audience laughs because it's safe to laugh. This is the Bundys. After all, nothing ever gets too real. But then the tone shifts, almost imperceptibly at first. A detail here, a glance there, something that doesn't quite land as a joke. The motel isn't just run down. It feels watchful. There's a sense that the walls aren't as private as they should be. It's subtle enough that you might miss it if you're not paying attention. But once you notice it, it lingers. When the truth comes out, it doesn't arrive with a punchline. Hidden cameras, recordings, the realization that what was supposed to be a private escape has been turned into something else entirely. Suddenly, the laughter feels different. Not gone, but strained, like it's trying to hold on to a familiar tone while something heavier pushes through. This is where the episode crossed that invisible line. The show had always thrived on humiliation, but it was usually self-inflicted or exaggerated to the point of absurdity. Here, the humiliation felt invasive. It tapped into a fear that wasn't cartoonish or distant. It was real. The idea that your most personal moments could be taken, exposed, and used without your consent. For a modern audience, this might not seem as shocking. In a world shaped by surveillance, data leaks, and viral scandals, the concept is almost expected. But at the time, it was different. Television hadn't fully explored that kind of vulnerability, especially not in a comedy. It wasn't just edgy. It was unsettling in a way that didn't neatly resolve itself with a joke. The episode continued, try and find its footing within the show's established style. There were attempts to bring back the humor, to frame the situation in a way that audiences could laugh at. AL's outrage, Peg's reactions, the absurdity of taking the situation court. It all fit the structure. But something had changed. The foundation of the humor had shifted from exaggerated inconvenience to something more personal. In the courtroom scenes, the tension becomes even more apparent. What should feel like a farcical legal battle carries an undercurrent of discomfort. The jokes are still there, but they land differently. Instead of pure laughter, there's a hesitation, a moment where the audience isn't sure how to react. The Bundys aren't just a butt of a joke. They're victims of something that feels uncomfortably plausible. That distinction mattered more than anyone expected. For viewers, it created a strange dual reaction. Some appreciated the boldness, the willingness to push beyond the usual boundaries. Others felt it went too far, that it touched on something that didn't belong in the show's comedic world. And for the network, that division was a problem. Television, especially at that time, relied heavily on predictability, not in storytelling, but in audience response. Networks needed to know that viewers would tune in, laugh, and leave satisfied. This episode disrupted that pattern. It introduced uncertainty, not just within the story, but in how people would receive it. Sponsors pay close attention to that kind of shift. Comedy is safe when it stays within agreed limits, when it pokes fun without provoking deeper discomfort. But when a storyline brushes against real fears, it becomes hard to control the reaction. And in an industry where perception can directly impact revenue, that risk isn't taken lightly. The episode aired, but not in a way that drew attention to itself. There was no build-up, no promotion highlighting its controversial nature. It slipped into the schedule like any other installment, but the response behind the scenes was immediate. Concerns were raised, discussions held, decisions made. And then, just as quietly as it appeared, it was gone. There was no dramatic announcement declaring it banned, no official explanation outlining why it wouldn't be shown again. It simply disappeared from reruns, from syndication packages, from the rotation that kept the show alive long after its original run. For years, it existed more as a rumor than a confirmed piece of television history. That absence only added to its mystique. Fans who had seen it remembered the feeling, even if the details blurred over time. Those who hadn't heard fragments, descriptions that sounded almost exaggerated. It became one of those stories that felt too specific to be entirely made up, yet too elusive to fully confirm. In reality, the decision to pull the episode wasn't about a single moment or line. It was about the cumulative effect, the way the story shifted the tone, the way it lingered in a space that didn't resolve cleanly. It challenged the balance the show had carefully maintained, the unwritten agreement with its audience about what kind of discomfort was acceptable. What makes it more interesting is that the episode wasn't poorly made. It wasn't a failure in terms of writing or performance. In many ways, it was exactly what the show prided itself on being: bold, unapologetic, willing to take risks. The problem was that it succeeded too well in one particular direction. Years later, when the episode resurfaced, it found a different kind of audience. One shaped by a world where privacy concerns were no longer abstract, where the idea of being recorded without consent wasn't just a hypothetical scenario, but a recognized issue. In that context, the episode felt almost ahead of its time. Watching it now, the discomfort is still there, but it's framed differently. It doesn't feel like a misstep as much as an experiment. One that pushed the show into territory it wasn't fully equipped to handle, but did so with a strange kind of honesty. It reveals how close comedy can come to something more serious, and how quickly that shift can change the entire experience. There's also something telling about the way it was handled. The quiet removal, the lack of explanation, the decision to let it fade rather than confront it directly. It reflects a different era of television, one where controlling the narrative often meant erasing it. Today, that approach feels almost impossible. Controversial content doesn't disappear. It circulates, gets dissected, analyzed, debated. The very thing that once led to the episode being hidden is what now makes it interesting. It's not just about what happens in the story, but about the reaction provoked and what that says about the time it came from. In the end, the episode stands as a reminder that even a show built on breaking rules has limits. Not fixed, not clearly defined, but present nonetheless. It shows how comedy can brush up against reality in ways that challenge both creators and audiences, forcing them to reconsider what a line actually is. And maybe that's why it still resonates. Not because it was the most outrageous or the funniest, but because it dared to step into a space that felt a little too real. It didn't just make people laugh. It made them uneasy. And sometimes, that's the kind of reaction that lingers the longest. The Bundys returned to their usual chaos in the episodes that followed, as if nothing had happened. The rhythm was restored, the balance regained. But for those who know about that one missing piece, it adds a layer to the show's history, a glimpse of what happens when the formula bends just a little too far. It's easy to look back and label it as simply the banned episode, but that doesn't quite capture what makes it interesting. It wasn't just removed because it was offensive or shocking. It was removed because it disrupted something deeper, something less tangible but just as important. And now, with it finally out in the open, it invites a different kind of viewing experience. Not just as a lost chapter, but as a moment where a show known for its sharp edges discovered just how sharp they could really be.